So it looks like we're recording again, which means we can start looking at the parry of tierce. Tierce, which I keep pronouncing tierce, even though I intend to say it as tierce, as in tertiary, is third hand position in French foil numbering, and it's kind of helpful to remember the numbers. But I'm going to keep saying tierce because I've given up trying to make myself say tierce, even though that makes drastically more sense from a understanding what the hell is going on perspective. So I'm sorry, I guess, is the moral of that story. All right. Anyway, so for the parry of tierce, we come on guard, and this time we punch us. We turn our hand over to basically the same hand position as pattern one. A tip flicks up, and a hand moves over just slightly, and you actually want to kink your wrist a bit. You're going to basically pull sort of your pinky finger into the bottom of your wrist a little to make sure that you're meeting the blow edge to edge. Or you're taking blow on your edge. Weirdly enough, just because your opponent's sword is hitting your edge doesn't mean they're hitting with their edge. And what you're doing in a lot of these parries is you're creating a plane that your opponent's sword will slide down. So the reason I have my sword out at 45 degrees is I don't want to get cut over. But at the same time, I want my opponent's sword to hit my sword and travel down and crash into basically my shell. So crash into this sort of angle here, because then from here, they either get stuck there, which is good for me because it means I've got control as they come back, or they hit and they skim off, which is also good for me because that means their sword is over here. It's not near me, which one means that they can't hurt me, or at least they have to take a second action to hurt me. And I've got a very quick line to their forearm if they're the sort of person who wants to kind of hang around. Or alternatively, if they want to pull back, I've got a lot more space to come back at them. So when you're parrying, think about, don't just think about the line that you're covering, think about the trajectory of your opponent's sword. And this is why you have your sword out at 45 degrees. If you had it flat like this, you wouldn't be providing a line to come down. And if you had it flat like this, your opponent could cut over, could very, very easily cut over or under your sword. You don't want to do, well, there are parries where your sword is horizontal, but they're for more specific situations. For general, you want your sword up at about 45 degrees like this, or like this if you can see it in the reflection. I did switch back to the sword because it's important that you see the edge, but I'll probably go back to the stick for future exercises. All right, so for tierce, lifting my tip up, turning my hand over to basically the same hand position as cut number 2, and bring it out so that my thumb is in line with the outside edge of my body. And trying to hope that my dog will start behaving. So for tierce, it's punch to tierce and back to guard. So let's practice that a few times. Tierce, back to guard. Tierce, back to guard. Tierce, back to guard. Tierce, and back to guard. Tierce, and back to guard. Tierce. Now, as always, I want my tip to be in line with the other edge of my body. So basically, I want my hand on one side of my body and my tip on the other. And that's a good tip, not just for parries, for your basic parries, but also for cuts. In fact, it's a really, really good idea to think of cuts as basically parrying forwards aggressively. So when I do my tierce, so my tierce parry is basically a retracted version of where my hand is for my cut number 2, up until the point where the tip comes down and it hits. So tierce, 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 and tierce. Incidentally, the difference between a parry and a guard in the same hand position is how high the tip is. So this is a tierce parry, this is a tierce guard. My tip is basically level where it is for my medium guard. And after, the tierce guard is probably the one I use the most after a medium guard. And it's probably the one that, well, it's definitely more common during the period. Hutton's really the only master who uses medium guards the medium guard very much, and he loves it. Whereas most will use either a tierce guard or like a low hanging guard. Anyway, let's move on and look at another sort of the tierce spectrum, which is the low tier. So in the same way I have low cart, for low tierce, I just open my elbow up I want to make sure that my hand is on one side of my body, my tip on the other, so that I'm crossing my body. And I just have a straight arm. And when I do it, I actually punch straight down. Just bang, straight down into the opponent's sword. And the reason why I like low tierce and low cut as a low parry is a lot of time low cuts are a feint. So someone will throw a cut and then drop their sword. This way you can just come down straight on top. So let's have a look at low tierce parry. So low tierce, back to guard, low tierce, and 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 back to guard, and once more, low tierce, and back to guard. Right. So now let's look at the last of the tierce spectrum. So I'm going to kneel down to not upset my landlord, and that's the high tierce parry. So this is where I bring my sword right up to stop a high cut. So same idea. I don't want to let my elbow bend more than 9 degrees. So I'm raising from my shoulder. I'm using my shoulder. Yeah, and this is something you can actually practice at home. Is go to a parry, either a tierce or a cut parry. Open your elbow up to go down. Come back up to mid, and then raise and punch your roof. Don't punch your roof. So just going all the way down and all the way back up. Right. So for high tierce, all we do is punch straight up. So high tierce and back to guard, 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 and high tierce. All right. So I'm just going to shake my shoulder out. If your shoulders are getting sore, it's a good idea to sort of shake them out. Or I like this kind of big windmilling kind of move my elbow back or move my shoulder back kind of motion to loosen things up, because they do tense up a bit. And especially because we're sitting in front of our computers, things get really, really tense. But let's loosen things up by by doing the parries randomly. So same deal as before. I'm going to call out a random parry, and I want you to go to that parry, and then come back to guard. So, and it's just going to be the tierce parries. I'm not going to be too mean and throw like other random parries in there. So go. So low tierce, back to guard. High tierce, back to guard. Tierce, back to guard. Tierce, back to guard. High tierce, back to guard. Low tierce, back to guard. Low tierce, back to guard. High tierce, back to guard. Tierce, back to guard. Tierce, back to guard. Low tierce, back to guard. High tierce, back to guard. And tierce, and back to guard. All right, so those are the tierce parries. So I'm just going to see if there's any questions. So if you have any questions, do ask. And yeah, then I may or may not let my dog run through. I don't know if he wants to say hello to me because he's been missing me all day, or if he just wants to pee, but either way, we'll find out. So, but are there any questions? I'll take those as a no, so I'm going to stop recording. All right.